Well, hello everybody. Welcome back into the Color Gemstone Academy. I'm your instructor, Paul Deasy, and this is my YouTube channel, Paul Deasy Gemstones. As always, I'd like to ask each and every one of you, if you have not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. I know that it says subscribe. That can be scary. You think it costs a lot of money, but it costs you absolutely nothing. I do all these videos for free, but the more of you that subscribe, it allows me to monetize in different ways and still do it for free for you. Well, this week's episode is going to be our question and answer series, and this is episode 19 of our question and answer series. Now this is where I get to the questions that you write to me on the YouTube comments section, and a lot of them I like to repeat on the air here because a lot of you might have the same questions but may be too shy to ask them. And if you see me looking down, don't be offended. It's just because I'm reading them off of the computer. I write your questions on the computer and then I read them to you. So without further ado, let's get into our question and answer series. The first question comes from Rob Rabbit, and this comes from episode 62, A Blast from the Past. If you haven't seen that one, I found an old video of me hosting at HSN, and I have no recollection of it. There was some weird dragon character that was there. We had a lot of fun and a lot of banter, but I don't remember what his purpose was for being there. Anyway, he says, Jim Henson would have been proud of you. Well, thanks, Rob. I'm not sure that Jim Henson really would have been proud of me because Jim Henson was the puppeteer and the dragon was not me. It was some other actor, somebody who had his hand up the dragon's rear end. So he's the one that deserves most of the credit. So Jim Henson would likely be proud of him. I was just the goofball talking to the dragon. But thank you anyway. I really do appreciate that. All right, moving on. ZCM Believer. This is from episode 21, which is Turquoise 101. And he says, very informative, thank you very much. I have a question, my friend. There's a German company by the name of Thomas Sabo that sells imitation turquoise, but they don't give any details on what the material is made from. What do you think it is made from, and does the color fade in time? Thank you so very much. Okay, great question. I'm not really familiar with the company. And I was traveling when that question first came in. In fact, Judy and I have been traveling a lot lately, which is why sometimes I'm scattering to get these, scrambling to get these on. Anyway, I finally got home. I got access to my computer. I looked them up. And to their credit, I looked at some of the jewelry, especially the rings that they're selling. And they had one in particular that was a silver ring with a choice of imitation turquoise or tiger's eye. Now, I will give them credit, full credit, for calling it imitation turquoise. And as I mentioned, probably in my initial answer to you, I said, if they're calling it simulated or imitation turquoise, that's fine. They're saying exactly what it is. If they're saying synthetic turquoise, that's something different altogether, because remember, synthetic gemstones have all the same physical, chemical, and optical properties of the gemstone. So they call it an imitation turquoise. I have no way of knowing just from a picture what it is that they're using for that. It could be plastic. It could be howlite, which is actually a gemstone that is white, that looks a lot like turquoise with matrix in it. Sometimes they dye that blue to look like turquoise, and again, to their credit, they're calling it imitation turquoise, so no problem there. As far as will it fade over time, really depends on what they used. If it's a blue plastic, that might be a color that stays with it a lot longer. If it's a dyed howlite, again, if you end up exposing that to something like acetone, it's going to run, and so it would definitely fade over time if it were something like that. One other thing that I will tell you, and again, I have no vested interest in this and I don't know the company, but just from my point of view, I noticed that they had a couple of rings that were, tiger's eye and the simulated turquoise, and it was $219. Now, I find that pretty steep, just me personally. Now, it looked like it was a good fair amount of silver in the ring, and silver certainly has risen in value over the last, year, certainly. and will perhaps continue to do so as we start worrying about inflation. But I would think that if you're getting the tiger's eye, which is a genuine stone, or even genuine turquoise, you should be able to get genuine turquoise, not simulated turquoise, in sterling silver, even with a rather heavier silver ring, for $219. I wouldn't waste my money on the simulated, unless you just love the look. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so our next question comes from Cool Super Mario. From episode 8, Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. Turquoise continues to be one of the most popular and most asked about lessons, and there's several lessons in here on turquoise, so check your playlist, and I cover a lot of this information. Okay, so Cool Super Mario says, I bought some cabochon claimed as stabilized Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. I tried to test it and I soaked them in acetone. They turned white after several hours. Are all stabilized turquoise stones like this? Well, first of all, awesome question, Super Mario, Mr. Cool Super Mario. But and that's why I'm including this on this lesson. The answer is no. Not all stabilized turquoise is like this. And I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else from my lessons, I talk about turquoise in the stabilization process, and stabilizing is not a bad word, it's a good word. Turquoise is a very porous mineral, and if you don't fill those pores with something, it can be very brittle. So over time it would crack, or it would adhere, the oils and lotions on your skin would seep into the stone eventually, because the pores are going to be filled with something, and you would see that stone would change color over time. But not all turquoise that is stabilized is dyed. The one that you have, when the blue started to fade with the acetone, that's not an indication that it was stabilized. It's an indication that it was dyed. Now, it probably was stabilized even if it's a dyed turquoise, but not all stabilized turquoise is dyed. So that's a distinction I really wanted you to know. I'm sorry that the one that you got was dyed. Some of the problems with, especially with turquoise, and you're trying to get the provenance of a stone, like did it come from Sleeping Beauty mine, did it come from the number 8 mine, you're sort of at the mercy of the person who's selling it to you. So my best advice is find somebody that will talk to you about turquoise, that's going to be very honest about turquoise, and don't just take their word for it. Ask the questions. When they told you that it was stabilized, you could have also asked the question, has this been dyed? And they would be obligated under law, if they're in the jewelry trade, to tell you anything that has been done to that turquoise. I hope that answers your question, and I hope you get a better turquoise in the future. I really do love these lessons. I see so many familiar faces, or at least names that I can put to the faces. And this next one comes from Glenna Oro. She's a fan of not only this channel, but our Facebook lives with Judy Crowell and Paul Deasy on Sundays. And she's a fan of cooking and a fan of gemstones. Anyway, this is also from episode 62, A Blast from the Past. And she says, Dear Paul, I do believe that vintage clip of you certainly qualifies as a gem. And I think what she's referring to, I said I didn't have time to do a gem lesson here. Judy and I had to run out of town for a couple of days. It was her mother's birthday. We were down in Sarasota. But so I just threw up that lesson, or that me and as a shopping channel host like 25 years ago, something like that. Anyway, she says that qualifies as a gem. And Glenna, that's nicely put. And I don't know if that lesson qualifies as a gem, but I can tell you at my age, I certainly qualify as an antique. We'll just leave it at that. All right, next one up. Also, this happens, I guess, a lot, but I get a lot of questions from the previous lessons. And if I haven't gotten to one of yours in the past, I'm trying to get to each and every one of them. It takes me a long time to do so, and I'm going to try and, do more of them each day so that I can get more of you involved in the show. But this is from Sis M, also known as Sis Miller, another fan of the Sunday Fun Day with Paul and Judy shows. She was also watching A Blast from the Past, and she says, oh, that was fun seeing the old video. Thank you, Paul. Well, thank you, Sis. In fact, sadly, there's probably going to be a lot more where that came from. Judy and I recently converted some of our old VHS tapes and shows to a thumb drive, so we're going to have a lot of different old shows. In fact, I also found some footage of things like when I went to Africa, to Tanzania, to the Tanzanite mines, and I had to record all of these things that were going to end up being in the show. So that might be a fun segment that I add to my channel. I don't know what to call it. Blast in the Past, I think, works for the old videos of me hosting, but for other footage from mines that I might put together in small segments, let's all come up with a name for what I should call those segments. Like if it's little snippets of parts of the Tanzanite mining trip or other turquoise mining trips. And that's my answer. Thank you, sis. That was a great question. All right. I think this will be my last question for today, and I'll get more of them next week. This is from, speaking of a blast from the past, Tony Zampana from episode 62, a blast from the past, says, "Come on, Paul, even I remember those. This is your show planner, Tony from HSC, which is when it was called Home Shopping Club. It was always a pleasure. You, Dan Dennis, and Ed Purser were always the best to work with. Much love, my friend." Well, Tony, much love back at you. And I hope you're doing well. Obviously, we're right down the road from HSN now. Judy's actually doing some products on HSN. But again, for the life of me, I have no recollection of that show that I did with that dragon. If you remember what the purpose of that was it to promote an upcoming show or a comic thing that this Scorch character was associated with? Because I really don't remember. It was a lot of fun. He was very quick and funny on the air, but I don't know, was that a recurring creature on the shows or was it just to promote something? If you have that answer, let me know, and then I'll let the rest of the audience know as well. Well, that's going to do it for this episode 19 of the question and answer series. Thank you so much for watching my channel. Remember, if you have not yet subscribed, please do so. It doesn't cost you anything, but it allows me to keep doing these lessons for you for free. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week for another edition of Questions and Answers. Bye-bye, everybody.